One director spent 8 hours photographing a cake and never worked again. Another lost $200 million and got sent back to Pixar for life, and there are 18 more just like them. Jan de Bont was the cinematographer on Die Hard back in 1988. Then he directed Speed and Twister, both massive action hits. So when Simon West's Tomb Raider made enough money for a sequel and West didn't come back for it, de Bont seemed like the perfect replacement to step in. He shows up on the first day of production and the studio tells him they're cutting $12 million from his budget. Right there, day one, before he shot anything. His movie just got $12 million smaller. And here's the part nobody told him. The makers of the Tomb Raider game also had approval over the story. He found that out while he was already making the movie. Years later, he talked about it and said it wasn't a great experience, that the studio interfered in ways he couldn't work around, and the game developers having creative control completely blindsided him. The movie he made was actually better than the first one. It made $160 million worldwide on a $95 million budget, which sounds okay until you factor in marketing costs. And there's also the fact that the first Tomb Raider made $274 million. So the sequel did almost half the business of the original, which by Hollywood standards is a disaster. After that, de Bont never directed another movie. Frank Darabont in the late 90s was unstoppable. He made 2 Stephen King adaptations back-to-back, and both of them were masterpieces. In early 1997, Castle Rock gave him a 2-picture deal. First picture was The Green Mile, which delivered. Second picture was going to be The Majestic, a feel-good Capra-style period drama, and he got Jim Carrey to star in it. Carrey actually dropped out of Death to Smoochy specifically to do this movie. Warner Brothers looked at what they had. Darabont coming off 2 massive critical successes. Jim Carrey at the peak of his career, a crowd-pleasing story. They scheduled it as their big Christmas release for 2001, their major tentpole after Harry Potter and Ocean's 11. The expectations were huge. But Christmas 2001 was absolutely packed with releases, and Warner Brothers decided to open the Majestic on December 21st, the same day as The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. You can guess what happened next. The Majestic cost $72 million to make. It made $37 million total. After that, Darabont basically vanished from big studio movie making. He came back in 2007 with The Mist, but that was it. He hasn't directed a feature film since. It's been almost 20 years. He's done fine for himself, though. Went into television and created The Walking Dead. And last year he directed episodes for the final season of Stranger Things. Richard Kelly wrote and directed Donnie Darko when he was in his mid-20s. The movie completely bombed at the box office, but it became a massive cult classic. Kelly got labeled as this visionary young director with a completely unique voice. Then came Southland Tales in 2006. Big, ambitious sci-fi with Dwayne Johnson and Seann William Scott. It premiered at Cannes and got booed out of the festival. Made $375,000 at the box office. Kelly got one more shot. The Box in 2009, Cameron Diaz and James Marsden in a thriller about a mysterious box that offers you money if someone else dies. Cost $30 million, made $33 million worldwide. Once you factor in marketing, it lost money. And that was it. 16 years later, nobody's given Kelly the money to make another movie. Michael Sarn had a contract clause that said he couldn't be fired before turning in his first cut. And once he realized he had that protection, he used it to destroy the movie from the inside. This was supposed to be 20th Century Fox's big edgy film based on Gore Vidal's novel about a transgender woman dismantling Hollywood's patriarchy. They'd paid $750,000 for the rights, got Raquel Welch to star, even brought Mae West out of retirement. Then they hired Sarn, who'd made one small cult hit, and gave him that contract. Problem was, Sarn hated the novel, didn't want to make the film, thought it would be too gay. So he just stopped trying. He'd sit on set for 7 hours at a time doing nothing while everyone waited. One day he spent 8 hours photographing a cake. He kept rewriting the script until it made no sense. Called the legendary John Huston a decrepit old hack. Treated everyone like shit. The studio eventually shut down production and forced him to cobble together whatever he had. The result was unwatchable. Vidal disowned it. $5 million budget, made $4.5 million back. Sarn never directed another major film. Years later, Vidal wrote that he'd heard Sarn was working in a pizza parlor and called it proof that God exists. After The Deer Hunter won Best Picture, United Artists told Cimino he could make whatever he wanted. Complete creative control, unlimited budget. They greenlit $11 million for his Western epic and then just watched as he spent 4 times that amount. Cimino rebuilt sets that didn't look right, moved entire trees for the perfect shot, did 50 takes of simple scenes, shot over 200 hours of footage. The studio didn't stop him because they'd promised him unlimited power and couldn't figure out how to take it back. Heaven's Gate ended up costing $44 million. The 3.5-hour cut bombed, made $3.5 million at the box office. United Artists collapsed under the losses. And then Hollywood turned on him. The same people who called him a genius after The Deer Hunter now blamed him for killing New Hollywood. Critics went after him personally. He spent the rest of his career trying to recover and never did. By the 90s, he was making low-budget films nobody saw. Became a recluse, died alone in 2016 with basically no money left. Heathers made Michael Lehman look like the next Tim Burton. Then he got Hudson Hawk, $65 million Bruce Willis action comedy produced by Joel Silver at peak power. Should have been his Batman, the movie that launches him into the A-list. Except Hudson Hawk was Willis's passion project he'd been developing for years. And Silver was notoriously controlling. So Lehman went from 2 low-budget indie films straight into a big-budget mess with too many egos. The film made $97 million. It was the first bomb for the Willis-Silver team, and Hollywood needed someone to blame. They picked Lehman. He became the scapegoat for A Star's vanity project. Got branded as the guy who couldn't handle a big budget, and nobody let him forget it. Warren Beatty owed Elaine May. She'd done a major uncredited rewrite on his Oscar-winning film Reds, basically saved it in post-production. So Beatty started looking for a project where he could produce and star, give May the protection and resources he felt she'd never had before, and let her make the film she was capable of. Dustin Hoffman also owed her. She'd done extensive uncredited work on Tootsie. When Beatty approached him about starring in May's next film, Hoffman initially turned it down, but eventually he agreed. That decision killed Elaine May's career. Ishtar was supposed to be an adventure comedy. The production became a media-feeding frenzy before the film even came out. Story after story about how it was too expensive, how May's methods were wasteful, how the whole thing was out of control. The press had decided it was a disaster before anyone saw a frame of it. It opened at number 1 but dropped fast. Made $14 million against a $51 million budget. Columbia lost around $40 million. Hollywood mocked it relentlessly, and May never directed another film after that. She said later that if half the people making jokes about Ishtar had actually watched it, she'd be rich. Years later, filmmakers like Tarantino and Edgar Wright started defending it, said it got destroyed unfairly. In 2013, Obama gave her a National Medal of Arts. But her directing career never recovered. Rocky Morton and Annabelle Jankel had done music videos and commercials. Then they got offered the first live-action video game movie, Super Mario Bros. Should have been their big break into features. The production was a nightmare from the start. They wanted to make a dark cyberpunk version. The studio wanted something kid-friendly. 2 weeks before shooting, the studio handed them a completely different script. During filming, 7 writers kept doing new versions and scenes changed every single day. Morton and Jankel were in over their heads. They'd never done anything this big, and they were caught between their vision and what the studio wanted. The Los Angeles Times came to set and wrote about what a disaster it was. Dennis Hopper was in the movie, and he mocked the directors in the article while they were still filming. The day that piece published, their agency dropped them as clients. They still had weeks of shooting left to do. Not long after, the producers told them to leave the set. Morton and Jankel got fired from their own movie. Somebody else came in and filmed the ending. But here's where it got really ugly. Bob Hoskins, who played Mario, started doing interviews. And he'd call Morton and Jankel fucking idiots. And then he'd do another interview and call them fucking idiots again. This went on for years. He just wouldn't stop publicly trashing them. The film came out and bombed hard, made $21 million against a $48 million budget. When Morton and Jankel got back to LA, nobody would take their calls. They never made another feature film. Morton rebuilt a career in commercials, but everyone still knew him as the guy who ruined Super Mario. At Warner Brothers, there were two executives. One wanted to make The Avengers, a big $60 million summer movie based on the old British show. The other one never wanted it made. The first executive got it greenlit, fought for it, and protected the project. During production, the executive who championed it got fired. The one who'd hated the project from the beginning became head of production. Director Jeremiah Chachik said later that filming had gone smoothly. The problem started in post-production when he suddenly had no one protecting him, and the person in charge was someone who'd never wanted the movie to exist. After he turned in his cut, Warner Brothers tested it once in Phoenix. The audience response was bad. Based on that single screening, the studio started cutting. They removed over 20 minutes and the film stopped making any sense. The release date got moved from prime June to mid-August, the deadest part of summer. Warner Brothers wouldn't screen it for critics, which is never a good sign. When reviews came out anyway, they were some of the worst a major studio release had ever gotten. The Avengers made $48 million on a $60 million budget. After that, Jeremiah Chachik disappeared from theatrical films, moved to television, and never came back. An Oscar-winning set designer gets his shot at directing a major Hollywood film. What could go wrong? Roger Christian had worked on Star Wars and won an Oscar for it. Got another nomination for Alien. By 2000, he's ready to step up from designing sets to actually directing, and John Travolta hands him Battlefield Earth. $73 million sci-fi epic based on a Ron Hubbard novel. May 2000, Warner Brothers releases it opposite Gladiator. Within days, critics are destroying it in public. The camera never stops tilting at these weird Dutch angles. Everyone's overacting. The costumes look ridiculous. Roger Ebert writes that it might be one of the ugliest movies he's ever watched. $21 million domestic. That's what it makes. Christian's big directorial debut loses over $40 million. The film becomes a punching bag, and his name's attached to it. He never directs another studio picture. Christian tried explaining years later that the backlash was really about Scientology, not the movie itself. The war against Scientology was what triggered the initial backlash, and the film has nothing to do with it. It is pulp science fiction, and nobody got it. We never stood a chance. Fox saw Stephen Norrington's Blade in 1998, saw it made money, and hired him for their next comic adaptation. They had the rights to The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen and wanted another X-Men-style team-up hit. Fox didn't care about the actual comic, though. They just liked that it had heroes in a group. The source material was this dense Victorian thing by Alan Moore, and Fox decided to change pretty much everything about it. They forced in different characters, rewrote major chunks, micromanaged Norrington constantly, and they didn't give him enough budget for what they wanted. On top of that, Sean Connery kept clashing with him over creative decisions. The whole production was a mess. It comes out July 2003, makes $179 million on a $78 million budget, which barely breaks even once you factor in marketing costs. Fox kills any sequel plans immediately. Norrington quits directing after that, just completely walks away from filmmaking and becomes a sculptor instead. 20 years later, still hasn't directed anything else. And it was also Sean Connery's last film before retiring, so this flop managed to end two careers at once. Somebody at a studio approved a $100 million budget for a sci-fi comedy about moon gangsters starring Eddie Murphy. Director Ron Underwood knew going in the script wasn't ready, but Murphy's schedule was locked up for months, so they figured they'd fix it during that time. They brought in writer after writer. Murphy kept rejecting the new drafts. Nothing worked. At one point, Murphy told Underwood to just shoot the script as is and he'd make it funny with his performance. He didn't. The Adventures of Pluto Nash opened and made $7 million worldwide. $7 million on a $100 million budget. It instantly became one of the biggest box office disasters in history. Underwood took the fall for it. He directed one more film in 2005 called In the Mix. That flopped too. After that, he moved to TV full-time. Directed episodes of Grey's Anatomy, Nashville, some TV movies. His feature film career was done. There was supposed to be a Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman movie. Tim Burton was involved, $18 million budget, direct follow-up to Batman Returns. Warner Brothers looked at that idea and decided to throw it in the garbage. What they made instead had nothing to do with Selena Kyle and nothing to do with Batman. The main character's name is Patience Phillips. She dies, gets brought back to life by a mystical Egyptian cat, and now she has superpowers. Someone at Warner really thought this was a better idea than just bringing back Michelle Pfeiffer. They needed a director and hired this French visual effects guy named Pitoff, who'd never directed a Hollywood movie before. He'd done second unit work on Alien Resurrection, but that was it. Pitoff talked about it 20 years later and said the script never worked. They kept rewriting it during production, kept trying to fix it. A month before the movie hit theaters, they did a 10-day reshoot to patch up problems. The movie came out in 2004 and everyone hated it. Made $82 million on a $100 million budget, got destroyed by critics. Pitoff never got to direct another Hollywood movie after that. Warner gave him a franchise with a broken script, and when it bombed, he was done. Bart Kowiak was a cinematographer for years, worked with Sidney Lumet. When he started directing in the early 2000s, he found his lane pretty fast. Action movies that made money like Romeo Must Die. None of them were great, but they all turned profits and studios liked working with him. Then in 2005, he made Doom with The Rock, video game adaptation with a big budget that bombed at the box office. That should have been a warning sign, but he had enough goodwill built up and got another shot at a franchise movie. 4 years later, he made Street Fighter. $50 million budget, another video game property. $12.6 million at the box office. After that, he went back to being a cinematographer. He's done a couple direct-to-streaming movies since then, but his career as a Hollywood director was over. 2 franchise bombs in 4 years, and nobody wanted to hire him anymore. Adrian Lyne had this incredible run in the 80s and 90s. Flashdance put him on the map, then he just kept winning. 9.5 Weeks, Fatal Attraction, Indecent Proposal. He made sexy adult thrillers that were classy and made a ton of money. Studios loved him. He could do whatever he wanted. So Lyne decided his next project would be Lolita. Nabokov's novel about a grown man obsessed with an underage girl, one of the most controversial books ever written. Kubrick had adapted it back in 1962 and kept the sexual stuff mostly implied because of censorship. Lyne wanted to do the opposite. He was going to fully explore the sexual relationship. Got Jeremy Irons and Dominique Swain, made the movie, and then couldn't get anyone in America to distribute it. Nobody wanted to touch it, and we all get why. It eventually got a limited release, made $1.1 million from a $62 million budget. Lyne disappeared after that. 5 years went by before he made another movie, Unfaithful in 2002 with Richard Gere and Diane Lane. Critics liked it, but it didn't matter. The type of movies he made weren't in fashion anymore. Then another 20 years passed before he directed again. Deep Water in 2022, another erotic thriller, this time with Ben Affleck and Ana de Armas. It went straight to streaming and nobody watched it. Josh Trank made Chronicle when he was 27. Found footage superhero movie cost $12 million bucks, looked like it cost 5 times that. Everyone called him the next big thing, and Fox gave him Fantastic Four with a $120 million budget. And then everything fell apart. The stories that came out were insane. Trank fighting with Fox over everything. Reports of him screaming at cast and crew, being abusive on set. At one point, things got so bad with Miles Teller that they were standing chest to chest about to start throwing punches. Fox eventually just took the movie away from him, did massive reshoots without telling him, locked him out of the editing room. And the night before the premiere, Trank went on Twitter and told everyone the version being released wasn't his movie. Fantastic Four made $168 million on a $120 million budget. With marketing costs factored in, it was a disaster. Trank got fired from a Star Wars movie he was supposed to direct next. Miles Teller gave an interview years later where he wouldn't say Trank's name but said one person f***ed up the whole movie. Everyone knew who he meant. Trank didn't direct anything for 5 years after that. He tried to get back, made Capone with Tom Hardy in 2020. $20 million budget, just $800 grand at the box office, and that was it. Alex Proyas had this reputation in the 90s as the guy who could take a big studio assignment and make it actually interesting. His debut was The Crow in 1994. Production was a nightmare, Brandon Lee died on set, but somehow Proyas pulled off the movie that looked stunning and became a hit. Then he made Dark City in 1998, which was even better. Producers saw him as a guy ready for that one big project that would launch him into the A-list. That one project was Gods of Egypt. Big-budget fantasy epic about Egyptian mythology, ambitious as hell. Except there was a problem before the movie even came out. This was 2016, right when Hollywood was getting hammered for whitewashing, and Gods of Egypt cast white actors as Egyptian royalty. People were angry before they'd seen a single frame. When the film finally came out, it was just terrible. Cheap CGI fest with horrible dialogue and worse performances. The movie lost around $90 million for the studio. And then Proyas made it so much worse. After the film bombed, he went on this lengthy Facebook rant blaming critics for the failure. Called them deranged and less than worthless. Said they were diseased vultures pecking at Roger Ebert's corpse. That was it. Nobody wanted to work with him after that. It's been 10 years now. All he's done since is some shorts. Disney rejected Andrew Stanton 3 times before Pixar hired him in 1990. He went on to make Finding Nemo and WALL-E. Became a legend. And in 2012, he finally got to make a live-action movie for Disney. It's still the most infamous bomb in studio history. John Carter was supposed to launch a space fantasy franchise for Disney. Production budget was over $250 million, and that's before the marketing costs, which were massive. The movie made $284 million worldwide. Disney took a $200 million write-down on it, one of the biggest money losers they'd ever had. A lot of the blame went to the marketing. People still call it one of the worst marketing campaigns in movie history. But Stanton was the director, and when you lose a studio that much money, they remember your name. He went straight back to Pixar after that. Made Finding Dory. Stayed in animation and TV. He did try to escape. Developed this ambitious live-action project called In the Blink of an Eye. Wanted to explore the entire history of the world. It got delayed for years. Then they dumped it straight to streaming. Stanton's got Toy Story 5 coming out this year, which will make $1 billion easy. So he's fine financially. But that one live-action attempt cost him a decade and he still hasn't gotten out. This one's kind of tragic because Simon Wells had done good work before this. Balto, the Prince of Egypt, solid movies. Then in 2011, he made an animated movie that lost so much money, it shut down an entire studio. Mars Needs Moms was a motion capture film produced by Robert Zemeckis' studio Image Movers Digital. Budget was $150 million. It made $39 million worldwide, one of the worst bombs in history. It came out the same week as Battle Los Angeles, which crushed it at the box office. Funny thing is, nobody remembers it now, but we're still talking about Mars Needs Moms. At the time, though, audiences just stayed away. The motion capture animation was creepy, the story was weak, and word spread fast on social media. Disney looked at the numbers and shut down Zemeckis' entire studio, and Simon Wells' directing career went with it. He made one more movie in 2015 and hasn't directed a feature since. It's been over 10 years. Tom Hooper spent the 2010s on this incredible winning streak. The King's Speech, The Danish Girl, every movie was an Oscar contender. And then he signed on to direct Cats, the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical adaptation. Everyone figured he'd pulled off the impossible and found a way to make that show work as a movie. Then the first trailer dropped and the internet freaked out. The CGI cat people became instant memes. Everyone said it looked like being trapped inside a nightmare, and there was actually a precedent for fixing this. Paramount had just delayed Sonic the Hedgehog to redesign the character after fan backlash, and that movie ended up being a huge hit. The path was right there. But Universal and Hooper decided to release Cats anyway. It made $75 million worldwide on a $95 million budget. Critics destroyed it. Then visual effects artists started talking about how Hooper allegedly mistreated them during production, and Webber said the movie was so bad it made him buy a dog. Hooper's been directing commercials since then. McDonald's, Vodafone, stuff like that. The big studio offers stopped coming.